So on the next page, this is with the application basis of this year. It's due on November 20th. We had so many applications last year, and the December 1st deadline wasn't enough time to read them all. So these are the things you need on your resume. I know that like a lot of people, you have one resume and you send it around to everybody you're applying, but please don't forget to highlight, or not highlight, but to include anything you've done that seems relevant to this. Like, you might not think, and I don't know why you wouldn't think this, but you might not. And people have done this in the past, like they don't put internships in Latin America. Why? I don't know. But then it comes out in the interview, and they have this great story about this thing they did. I'm like, wow, I'm so glad I decided to interview you because, you know, of other stuff, but I had no idea you did this. So please don't just like throw us the resume you give to a bank. Give us something that shows us, you know, just edit it. Put in anything you've done, whether it's doing ESL at your evening club here on campus, or whether it's, I don't know, of course you put in study abroad, but if you volunteered during your study abroad, please include that too. Those are all things that we want to know, and they really, you know, broaden out who you are. The letter of recommendation, you're welcome to get it from a professor. I would say, if you can, think about this as a job that you're applying to, so you want a letter from somebody who you worked for, or who has supervised you. If it was an internship or a summer job, or a professor you've done research for, that's fine too. But I can't tell you how unhelpful the letters are that are like, she writes a really good creative essay. Like, really? That's fine, but that's not what we're going to be probably having her do. So, you know, in her job. So try to get it from somebody who can really speak to what you're like as an employee, if you can, or as a research assistant, that's fine too, or a lab research, or lab assistant. All of that is fine. It's just, I don't care how much you participated in class. This isn't the school you're applying for. So the essays, if you have any questions about those, you can ask later. That's kind of a lot to talk about. Transcripts, definitely your undergrad transcripts, if you have an MPA or MA of any kind, include that too. Study abroad, if the grades and the course names are included on your college transcript, I can't remember if they are at Princeton or not, I think they are, then you don't have to get it from like Loxo or somewhere that's going to be difficult to get it from and expensive. And then the supplementary form is just the language stuff. So this year we have an online application. I don't know if anyone has tried to do it yet. If you have, then clearly I set it up wrong because I haven't gotten notifications about it. I'll just assume people haven't. But so in the past we asked people to email it and to submit a hard copy. So just submit a hard copy and do the online application, and that's that. The language requirement. This is sort of a. It really just depends what you're interested in doing. If you want to work for Endeavor, for instance, I was saying this to someone earlier. They've been really spoiled by people with pretty strong Spanish skills in the past few years. So if your Spanish is sort of advanced beginner, they will interview you in Spanish, and not like I totally like lob softballs in the interviews I do, like what'd you do over vacation? Because I don't want to like scare people by asking them about like their ideas on public policy regarding education in places in, you know, rural Argentina. I mean, I'm glad if you know about that. If you can talk about that, that's great. But other interviews do ask questions like that, but I just want to be sure that like you can converse. But some of the organizations like Endeavor in Sao Paulo, they want a fluent speaker of Portuguese. I think. Like it really just depends. If you want to go to Mexico and work with what used to be called Convivencia Educativa, it's helpful to have strong Spanish, but if you need a couple weeks to get up to speed, that's fine. If you're going to go and work with indigenous people whose first language is a Maya language and not Spanish, you've got to have fluent Spanish, because if you're speaking broken Spanish and they're not speaking much Spanish either, it's going to be really hard. That said, if you go to work with the Sequoia Foundation in Brazil, a lot of what you're doing is going to be taking place in English, so if you need to learn Portuguese on the fly, that's fine. That's not a problem. So yeah, so I would say like, basically I like to say if you can be familiar within 3 to 4 weeks, enough with the language so that you feel comfortable getting around, so that it's not like yet another massive transition in your life because you've just graduated from college, this is your first job, and it's in a foreign country, and oh boy, you don't really speak the language. So that's a lot. So to cut that out is a good thing. And also, I think our partners like to think that the people will be able to really be good members of the working team after the first month, because it takes a month anywhere to settle in, really. And again, we can revisit that case by case when we get there, but that's just sort of a blanket thing. And then terms of last year, we had 290 applications and sent 34 people. I don't know how many applications we're going to get this year. Obviously, I'm assuming a lot, which is why I moved the deadline back, but hey, I could be wrong. Who knows? So the on-campus interviews are for people who are here, obviously. We have sort of like interview hubs around the country. So if you are going to be, well, you guys aren't, you're all around by, when would it be, like January 10th or something? You guys will probably be here for a reading period. But if you're not here and you can't get here because it's going to cost you a lot of money and time, that's fine. We have people in Chicago, in San Francisco, in DC, in Boston, et cetera. So we can match people up like that. So we will be working on the placements, hopefully get those done by the end of February, mid-March. So what makes a strong candidate? And so here are some, let's see. That's, I should know that. I think that's Mikey Donovan in Columbia, and Edward Hermey with the Butterfly at the Amazon Conservation Association, and Megan, who's all the way to your right, at Pro Peru. So, wait, so what makes a strong candidate? Sorry. Basically, like ideally, the top candidate will have a strong record of public service work, whether it's through internships or volunteer work or jobs or whatever it is, and a clear interest in Latin America, whether it's through the lens of art or dance, or whether it's policy, or rather politics, econ, history, anthropology, language study, whatever it is. We want to see that either you've done a law certificate or you studied abroad. I mean, obviously people have all of those things too, not just one, not just law, not just study abroad. Top candidates have always had like all of the stuff. But we're also really interested in seeing people who stand out because they're different in some ways. So you don't have to have all of that. And then I think that kind of covers everything. So yeah, I'm sure I left something out. A long day here, but if you have any questions about that, ask me later and we will readdress it. So these are some of the fields that we work with. I think that pretty much covers them all. As you guys know, I think we have 8 people in Endeavor this year, so we have a lot of slots in entrepreneurship, and hopefully, at least this is the plan, is that this year a lot of the Endeavor companies are going to be taking fellows too. So that would be more of a kind of business fellowship, I think, than entrepreneurship, but you would certainly be working with an Endeavor selected entrepreneur and watching the way that they build their business throughout the year. Education is another field we're trying to build placements in, and we're going to have a couple more this year. We have a new partner in Guatemala. It's kind of like a charter school, basically, I guess, that's working with kids living sort of in the poor areas outside of Antigua and giving them a shot at sort of a private school education, I guess. And we're trying to add more placements in public health too, because that's always a place where we have far more candidates than we have placements. So, but while we do have the list of what we assume are going to be the partners for this year on our website, we add at least usually 5 more throughout the fall and the winter. And even sometimes when we're working on placements, we get things that come along. Like there's this woman who's in Guatemala now, that was from Palito Atitlan. I only found out about it in June, I guess, because I just came back from maternity leave. And so anyway, so we sent her in late June. I was like, hey Alice, you still want to do a PiLA fellowship because we've got something? She was like, oh yeah, sure. So it could, that's not a deal, but it happens. So it's sort of an ongoing process. These are the countries that we work in. We basically send people everywhere except for places that have State Department warnings. Like we were going to send a few people to Honduras last year, but things just started going downhill fast, so decided not to. Cuba and Haiti for obvious reasons, but otherwise we try to send people all over.